Hello everyone. Let's do a study today on the fact that biblically the majority of Israel's kings were evil. I thought this video would be fitting as Israel begins its hearing today at the International Court of Justice. Israel is being tried by South Africa for genocide against Gaza. 23,357 people have died in attacks launched in a region that is densely populated by youths and children, over half of the population. To put it in perspective, 1% of the population of over 2.3 million people living in Gaza Strip have died in the past 3 months. The numbers are devastating. In order to begin to grasp what is occurring in the modern day, it's always invaluable to gain insights that can only come by examining biblical history. Let's begin by looking back to Israel's leadership in biblical times. A summary of ancient Israel's history reveals that all in all there were 42 kings in Israel and one queen who ruled instead of a king. Now Saul was the first king who ruled over all 12 tribes of Israel. After Saul's death, the kingdom was temporarily divided. Saul's son ruled 11 tribes and David ruled over Judah. After Saul's son was assassinated, David became king over all of Israel and Judah, the united kingdoms, and this was followed by his son Solomon. But after Solomon's reign over the 12 tribes, the kingdom comprising of these 12 tribes divided into what became known as the southern kingdom of Judah, consisting of Judah and Benjamin, and the northern kingdom of Israel, which was the remaining 10 tribes. Even its very first king, Saul, turned wicked. So we see from its inception, Israel's first ruler was corrupt. King David was the only consistently good king over all of Israel and Judah, because even King Solomon had a rocky experience as a king. He started off very good and he prized wisdom, but then he fell into pagan ways and idolatry and the seduction of the flesh. Thankfully, he repented at the very end. Now we see that at this division, when the United Kingdom separated into the North and South Kingdom, from that point on, there were 39 kings over Israel and Judah. Amongst these 39 kings, only 8 good kings ruled, and all 8 good kings came out of Judah. Judah, or Judea, in the modern day, is located in the West Bank, that is a part of Palestine. Isn't it interesting that all the good kings from the end of Solomon's reign onwards were from the region of Palestine, but every king in Israel was evil from that point on. Now the only exception to the rule over Israel from the division of kingdoms was Jehu. Jehu was used by the Lord to overthrow the wicked king Ahaziah and to eradicate Ahab's dynasty. And at his command, even the wicked queen Jezebel would die and plunge to her death, following which Jehu was appointed as king of Israel. But even Jehu turned corrupt in the end and followed idolatrous ways. So Israel has never had a very good track history. In fact, it's quite horrific. And we have this concept today that those who bless Israel will be blessed and those who curse Israel will be cursed. That is not in the Bible. That was a promise given to Abraham, not to the secular nation of Israel.
Genesis 12. Now the Lord had said unto Abram,
Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. People in ancient times were not blessed if they were in support of evil kings, simply because they ruled Israel. In fact, they would be cursed to support an evil king. And I'll give you an example of this shortly. With regards to King Ahab, it is recorded that he did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. In addition, he married Jezebel. She was the daughter of the king of the Sidonians. And Ahab, through her, was seduced into idolatrous worship of Baal and Ashtoreth. But we see that the Lord, at the time, he appointed Jehu to leave no man standing who had been in alliance with King Ahab. Anyone who had an alliance with the evil king Ahab was cursed. They had a curse upon them for which they lost their lives. Similarly, today, you could say that anyone who is in great support of an evil person who is in leadership, you could say they are in alliance with them. And then you could say that that same curse that lies upon the ruler would lie upon the person supporting them. Therefore, we've got to be very careful who we support. Being a leader of Israel did not grant the kings of Israel infallibility. In fact, as rulers who would influence the people, they are upheld to a higher level of accountability. Proverbs 16:12. It is an abomination for kings to commit wicked acts, for a throne is established on righteousness. Look at the prophets of the Old Testament. They would come against and rebuke kings who were corrupt. Samuel rebuked King Saul. Elijah rebuked King Ahab. Micaiah warned King Ahab. Jeremiah warned King Zedekiah. Today, these same prophets would be labeled anti-Semitic for daring to resist the ruler of Israel. But it is the job of the prophet to hold the king to remain on the narrow path. The prophet does not blindly support everything that the king of Israel does. And you could say today the body of Christ is likened to the prophet, keeping those in authority accountable. David, even the great King David, was rebuked by the prophet Nathan when he stumbled in his affair with Bathsheba and his dealings with Uriah the Hittite. Accountability from the prophet, who today is represented by the church, is absolutely vital. But we are seeing today that there's a blind support of all things to do with Israel, as though the ruler of Israel is somehow infallible. And yet you don't see this concept of infallibility anywhere in the Bible. Every ruler, every king, every queen is held accountable for their actions. Every leadership must be examined and tested with discernment. Let's look at the modern day with the formation of Israel. Going back further to the Balfour Declaration of 1917, this was intrinsic to the formation of Israel. The Balfour Declaration was addressed directly to Lord Rothschild, who was seen as the representative of the Jews. In fact, he represented a small group of British elites who were Zionist Jews. At that time, the Zionist Jews, this very small group, did not have the support of the Jewish people at large, because the Jewish people, the majority, were against Zionism. They didn't believe in Zionism because according to the Torah and the writings of the prophets, they would remain in exile until the Messiah returned and they received him. Of course, as believers, we know the Messiah has returned, but they have not received him. Now, these British elite Jews gave the impression to the British government that they were the mouthpiece of the Jews. And Lord Walter Rothschild was one of the leading men who would influence the British government that led them to pen the Balfour Declaration handing over Palestine to Israel. In 1917, in order to win Jewish support for Britain's First World War effort, the British Balfour Declaration promised the establishment of a Jewish national home in Ottoman-controlled Palestine. Let's look at the Rothschilds. They were never God-fearing Jews. They were ambitious men, politically minded. Today, if you go to Israel, the Rothschild name is all over the names of streets and buildings. You cannot miss it. And the state of Israel, when it was founded, it was based on the rulership of atheists. The Prime Minister Ben-Gurion was an atheist. The President Chaim Weizmann was an atheist. Chaim Weizmann was originally a chemist in weaponry. He invented the acetone bombs used in world wars, which is also why the British felt a sense of indebtedness to him and to this select group of Jewish Zionists, because they provided this weaponry. And then there's Theodor Herzl, who is the president and founder of the Zionist organization. He's also regarded as the father of modern Zionism. He was also an atheist, and yet he was demanding biblical promises of land restoration from a God whom he did not believe in. Then we have to look at the NAKBA of 1948. The word NAKBA means catastrophe because it was a catastrophic series of events on May 15, 1948, when Israel was formed. At the very same time, a massacre was occurring. It has been written that on May 15, 1948, one nation's triumph became another nation's catastrophe. Israel was established as a homeland for Jews, while the majority of Palestinians were displaced. The tragedy, the travesty where thousands of Palestinians were killed in a ruthless act of genocide. 531 Palestinian towns and villages were destroyed. 15,000 Palestinians were killed. This mass murder and bloodshed was occurring at the very same time that many in the world were wildly celebrating the formation of the state of Israel, unaware of all the bloodshed that was occurring. It was being hidden from the eyes of the world, but there must be an accountability for these war crimes. Today there is a schism between the Zionist Jews and the UltraOrthodox, the religious Jews in Israel. The religious Jews believe that they must remain in exile until the Messiah comes and is received. He must come first before the state of Israel can be formed. But the Zionists obviously reject this. Do you know that it was the Rothschilds who helped create Reformed Judaism in the early 19th century to come against it? Reformed Judaism declared that it was not necessary to wait for the Messiah before ending the exile. Reformed Judaism declared that the end of the exile occurs first, the nation of Israel is formed, and then the Messiah comes. This is contrary to traditional Judaism. All this was changed in the 1800s. Core foundational teachings in Judaism were transformed, and it was the Rothschilds that helped drive this, and I believe Jacob Schiff was involved in this as well. When I say that the state of Israel was formed by unrighteous men, bear in mind that the Rothschilds in the early 19th century, they were Sabbatean Jews and Frankists. They were a strange sect of believers. They were excommunicated by traditional Jews. They had strange ideas about immersing into every form of sin and perversion. It's all very strange and almost unbelievable. Frankism was a Sabbatean Jewish religious movement of the 18th and 19th centuries. There was a rejection of religious norms, and followers were obligated to transgress as many moral boundaries as possible. Frankism developed from Sabbatean Jewish thinking. The Frankists believed that Messiah would only return if all men were righteous, or alternately, if all men were evil. So since it's impossible for all men to be righteous, therefore their goal was that all mankind must be evil, must become evil in order to usher in the Messiah. This is the thinking of the Frankists. This is the thinking of the Frankists. And this is what the Rothschilds believed in. Do you see how strange and perverse this is? This is why they were excommunicated, and yet the Balfour Declaration was addressed to a man who is very highly suspected to be practicing and living in this line of thought, the Frankist line of thought. And today, many Zionist Frankist Jews own the media, TV, and newspapers and major platforms of the world, and they are setting the narrative. And also we have the schism between the Reformed Jews and the traditional religious Jews. There's a deep divide.
We hurt, we cry with the suffering of the Palestinian people. We will never accept this occupation. We will never accept this criminal entity called the Zionist state of Israel.
Jewish law does not permit us to steal, to kill, to occupy, to oppress. We oppose the existence of the state of Israel.
Here, because there is an impostor, somebody who's saying he represents the Jewish religion, and we are here to say that he's an impostor. Israel no more! 5, 6, 7, 8, and the killing, and the hate.
It is not the difference of religions which is causing this conflict. The state of Israel does not represent all Jews, and certainly does not represent the Jewish religion. According to Jewish religion, all of this is criminal. All of this is forbidden. Basics of Jewish belief teaches that Jews are in a divinely decreed exile. We are even forbidden to create a sovereignty for ourselves. But especially when this is by killing, stealing, oppressing an entire people. This is not only criminal according to international law. This is a true violation of Judaism. And still, those people who choose not to follow Judaism misuse that very same religion to justify all those crimes forbidden in Judaism. The root cause is this criminal occupation which is oppressing an entire people. We have to end this occupation in its entirety. If people will ask me my advice, the leaders of Israel should wake up tomorrow morning and step out of the Knesset and return the land back to indigenous population. I guarantee peace.
And they're not just in Israel, it's around the world. The religious Jews are vehemently against Zionism. If you go to Israel, they are the Hardim, or the ultra-Orthodox, and they make up about 15% of Israel's population. However, they're heavily silenced and persecuted for their resistance to Zionism because they believe they are still in exile. They don't agree with the occupation of Gaza. And today, with what is occurring in Gaza, I believe the veneer and the disguise that Zionism has used is being exposed because of this brutal, relentless attack on Gaza. It's becoming clear that something is not right. This is a genocide so cruel and so merciless, even the blind are beginning to see. I only began to learn about this from these events. It's interesting that since the state of Israel was formed till today, every prime minister, every president has been a Zionist Ashkenazi Jew. And if you look at it, its very foundation, there's a complete lack of righteous leaders. Not one leader in Israel truly followed the traditional commandments and teachings of Judaism, even though they call themselves Jews. And I won't even go into the fact that Hamas, in its early days, was heavily funded by Netanyahu himself. If not for Netanyahu's funding, Hamas wouldn't have grown to what it is today. And the sad truth is that it was deliberately supported to encourage factions and wars. And there's much more to this. And it's all linked to the building of the third temple. There's too much to get into that I cannot go into in this video. Now, there are a growing number of secular people in Israel as well. And also former soldiers who once served in the IDF who are now speaking out boldly against the corruption in Zionism. And the world at large is beginning to see through the deception. And the world is beginning to recognize some of the oppression the Palestinians have gone through. But the church needs to stand up and recognize its role. We need to be vigilant and discerning to stand up against evil and be willing to be unpopular. So be aware that not every bold voice that claims to support Israel is in fact supporting the true Israel. By the way, if we're really going to get into it, the true Israel in this era, since the days of the New Covenant, are those who are surrendered to Jesus. This is the true Israel. Galatians 3:16 states, "Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He does not say, and to seeds as of many, but as of one, and to your seed, who is Christ." Therefore, anyone who takes Jesus as Lord is a descendant of Abraham, and the blessings of Abraham come upon them by faith. Let's turn our sights back to events today. The church plays the role of the prophet. The prophet rebuked the wicked king. The prophet warned him to turn back to God. Ask yourself if you will blindly support every leader of Israel, even if they are engaging in war crimes that the whole world can see. Will you grant Israel's government infallibility despite its actions? Will you blindly support the massacre of innocents? Will you contend for war and death rather than life and peace and liberty? As believers in Christ, we pray for His kingdom come, His will to be done. And it comes through the righteous men, righteous women. It comes through obedience to God. It does not come through the leadership of the unrighteous that only leads to wars and more wars and cruelty and massacres. In Matthew 5:9, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called sons of God."